Let's take a look at a simple document in HTML just to get started and get oriented with what HTML is and how it works. This is a simple minimalist document. I call it the minimalist. You'll notice up there at the top it has a title, and that title says the minimalist. You know that it's the title because the words the minimalist are enclosed in a title tag and a title end tag. This bit here is called a tag. It's also called an element. More correctly, the entire thing with the end tag and the content is called an element. But this bit right here we call a tag. A tag in HTML is enclosed in angle brackets, and the keyword title identifies what that tag is and what it does. In this case, the keyword title is enclosed in the angle brackets, and you'll notice that there's no space in between the angle bracket and the word on both sides. There's the angle bracket, there's the word title, there's the other angle bracket, and you don't have any space there. That's important. In some circumstances you can have spaces, in other circumstances you can't, but for the most part you just want to make sure that there isn't any space there unless you have a good reason to put it. This is the end tag, and it's distinguished from the begin tag by the slash between the opening angle bracket and the word title. That slash tells the HTML parser that this is the end of the title element, and the title ends here, so to speak. This next bit is a paragraph tag, which is just the letter P within the angle brackets, and it identifies this paragraph. It says a simple HTML document. The end of the paragraph can be indicated by an end tag, or alternately, if it's followed by another paragraph, or as we'll find out later, another block level element, but in most cases another paragraph. The end tag is optional. The parser knows that it's the end of a paragraph because another paragraph is beginning. Some people put the end tag, some people do not. I do not. It is optional. And I don't want to confuse people when I'm teaching them into thinking that it's required when it's not. And you'll see a lot of documents out there, especially older documents, that don't include it. The documents that you'll see out on the web that do include it are generally automatically generated by an HTML editor or by some programmatic element on the web. Most of the time when a person is writing the code, you'll see it done this way. Now let's take a look at this document in the browser. It's pretty straightforward. Here we have the title, the minimalist, and the paragraphs, a simple HTML document, and if I had anything to say, I would say it here. Going back over to BBEdit, let's take a look at another version of this same document. The version we have here is the way that we used to do documents like this, and the version we have here is the way that they make us do it today. You'll notice this one has a lot of other stuff. Sure, here's the title, a simple document. Here's the paragraphs. But there's all this other stuff in here as well. This document is conformant to the HTML 4.01 standard. And this is the way we'll be doing documents throughout this course. The reason for this is when HTML was originally created, Tim Berners-Lee, who invented it, had no idea how popular it was going to get. So he just threw together a language that was loosely based on SGML, and it worked, and he was satisfied with that. In the time since then, though, HTML has become wildly popular, and people have wanted to add a lot of new features to it. Presentation features, markup features, objects, programmatic things, all kinds of stuff has been added to the language, and the language became a sort of a hodgepodge. One browser would understand these extensions, another browser would understand those extensions, and there wasn't any one place where everybody could get together and agree this is what the language is going to look like. And so the language was standardized by the W3C. You see the word W3C here. That's the World Wide Web Consortium. And that's the standards body that has standardized HTML and a few other web-related standards. As a part of this standard, a lot of things are now required of HTML that were not required before. There's a structure that's been imposed on the language, and we'll be following that structure. As I said before, this version works just fine. This version is correct, and we're going to teach you the correct way to do it. We'll get into the details of all of these elements in a later lesson. So let's take a look at what this other example, a simple document, looks like in the browser. That's the minimalist there, and here is a simple document. We'll cycle between them. You can see they are virtually identical, and yet they look so much different. The reason for that, as we said before, is that a simple document is fully compliant with the HTML 4.01 standard. And the plain document, the minimalist document, is not. Both of them will work in virtually all the browsers that are popular on the internet today. The reason to use the more complex version is simply so that it is standards compliant. As we move forward in the world of HTML and new features are added to it, we'll be able to take advantage of all of those new features as they're added to the language in future versions. Also, you'll be able to validate it with the validators that are available on the web. And as you have more complex documents, it'll become important to you to make sure that they're correct. And later on in the program, we'll show you an example of a validator and how that works. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the editor that I'm using here. I'm working today on a Macintosh, which is actually not my normal environment. Normally, I write in a Unix environment, and I use an editor called VI that's very old and stodgy and traditional, but I happen to like it because I learned it 20 years ago. The important point here is to use a text editor, a plain, simple text editor, and to not use a word processor. Let me tell you the reason for that. A word processor is designed to create documents for printing out with bold headings and different fonts and upside-down text or whatever. And because of that, they add additional information to the document, which describes the layout features. And if you put that in your HTML document, it won't look right on the screen. It'll have all kinds of gibberish in it, and you'll wonder what happened. Your HTML document, the markup is described in the HTML, so you want it to be just the HTML, just the facts. And to do that, we use a plain text editor. Here on this Macintosh, I'm using an editor called BBEdit, which is available by shareware over the internet. On a PC in a Windows environment, I use an editor called TextPad, which is also available. It's not the one that comes with it, which is just too plain. It has some good editing features. And in Unix, of course, I use VI. So the important point to remember is to use a plain text editor and to not use a word processor for editing your documents. And now we'll move on and we'll look at some of the other features of HTML.